I think the harshness of it, the toughness of it, seemed to be different from some of the things that he said more recently, particularly in the context of the meetings that he's had with President Trump, particularly in Singapore, and the visual images that we had when they met in Panmunjom. It's a very different feeling now in what he said. I think it's hard to tell. I don't see any indications that this is going to be something that's going to be easily resolved. Part of the problem is that the North Koreans follow American politics. They don't correctly interpret it most of the time, but they do understand what's going on. And with Trump facing an impeachment trial and potential removal from office, although indications are that that's not likely to happen, there's some uncertainty about Trump. There's also the election coming up, and while Trump has been very enthusiastic about pressing his case, he hasn't made great progress in terms of that. Democrats are still disorganized, so it's very uncertain as to what's going to happen, who the next president's going to be. And I think the North Koreans are going to be very cautious about reaching any agreement until they get some clarity on what the American who is going to be the American president. Yeah, I think there's no question. The United States' principal attention, I think, for the next little while at least, is going to be on Iran and what kind of actions will the Iranian government, the Iranian military engage in the Middle East. Trump has already sent a number of U.S. military forces to Iraq, and I think that other kinds of actions are likely to follow. The United States is very concerned about the instability in the Middle East. Trump has not handled it well. And I think the principal American focus is going to be on Iran in terms of foreign policy. The other thing in terms of Trump is that we are further and further into the election season. We're less than a month away from the first of the Democratic primary activities, the Iowa caucuses, followed by New Hampshire primary. These actions are going to shift Trump's attention, away from foreign policy to domestic politics, and he is going to be tweeting about American politics and not about North Korea. Yeah, and part of it is the North Koreans want to negotiate with the United States, but they want agreement to their terms. And I think even if conditions were much more favorable, it would be very difficult for the United States and North Korea to reach agreement. That would require a lot of effort, a lot of negotiation, a lot of hours. Without that, I think it's going to be much more difficult. And the other thing that I'm concerned about is not only has the relationship between Kim and Trump soured to some extent. Trump is still very careful about saying positive things about Kim. He's not been critical, even though Kim has been less than positive in terms of the relationship with the United States. The relationship with South Korea has not done very well. The North-South relationship is not nearly as good as it was months ago. And I don't know what this means in terms of Kim deciding that cooperation is not going to lead to that much, and therefore he's going to test new weapons and emphasize his military capabilities. It would be unfortunate for the whole region. I don't think there's been much change in the human rights situation in North Korea. Conditions in North Korea are still difficult. People are still denied access to information. People are still limited in terms of their ability to travel. From what we can tell, the prison camps are still operating very much as they have in the past. There's been no real change in terms of that. I think the problem is there's not as much attention on the human rights issue as there's been in the past. The United Nations continues to do a good job in terms of pressing North Korea on its human rights. the special rapporteur that has been designated by the Human Rights Council, Mr. Quintana Oja, has done an extremely good job, and he continues to focus attention on these issues and these problems. The United States has played a negative role. I think that is a very sad reflection. No change in North Korea, and the United States de-emphasizing human rights is a very serious problem. Well, what we need to do is work at lower levels to find areas where we can work out agreement. And when we're able to do that, then we can move forward and then try to make progress. Trump, unfortunately, and Kim Jong-un as well, both seem to think the only way to solve these problems is to have the two most important people side by side in a conversation and negotiate it out. Nobody wants to see that. Neither leader wants to lose face by making concessions. Summits are largely press events, not negotiating occasions. And what we need to do is we need to have negotiations going on behind the scenes without a lot of attention in terms of press noticing what's happening and this kind of thing, but have some agreement that we need to make some progress on issues between our countries. There are some areas where we could make concessions to show North Korea good faith without changing the sanctions. We could allow, for example, American non-government organizations that provide humanitarian assistance, educational assistance, medical help. We could help them in terms of allowing them to go to North Korea, providing support and help for them. But we're not doing that. We're not taking little steps that we might be able to take in hopes that someday somebody's going to take a big step. Not going to happen.